So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the North East and Cumbria branch of IIRSM. I'm Joanne Price, Joe Price. I go by very many different names, whoever you are and who's met me in the past. I've got the great pleasure of actually being the chair of the branch, which is a great honour. Today, I'm going to be handing over, though, to our vice chair, Tama, to do our relevant introductions. We'll just give it a few moments for everybody to actually get in, get settled down. Hopefully you've all grabbed yourself a drink, got your refreshments. Just a quick reminder for everybody to please do stay on mute. However, if you do want to actually ask any questions in person, we do have the facility to actually open up that microphone and get you to speak, because very often that's a lot better than trying to type something. However, if you don't want to do that, we do have a Q&A box, which if you have got a question to ask, please do place it in there. It just helps us facilitate where those questions are. There is the chat function there. If anyone does actually want to send a message to each other, let us know where you're from, which part of the world, because we do know that not everybody is in the North East and Cumbria, and we are fully open and welcome to everybody, whether it's UK or international. So what I'll do, now that hopefully we've got a few people that have joined us, I'll actually hand over to Tama.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, greetings from a very drizzly northeast. I imagine Cumbria is not looking too dissimilar, or in fact the rest of the UK. I am delighted to introduce Di Gates as our speaker for this lunchtime webinar. Di is the founder of Connection Heroes, which is a powerful learning community with an audacious goal to unleash the human power, or the power of human connection in workplaces around the world. Through this work specifically, Di gathers insights and data about how human connection impacts people and profit, what blocks connection or breaks trust, and more importantly, what skills leaders and managers need to build happy, healthy, and high-performing teams in an ever and rapidly changing workplace. I think this is going to be a really fascinating session. We're delighted to have you here, Di. So without further ado, please do take the stage.
Thank you very much, Tama, and hello everyone. Thanks for taking some time out to join us today. As Tama said, I'm the founder of an organisation called Connection Heroes, and we deliver science-backed training that uses an understanding of human neuroscience, so what happens when we start to build trust, start to understand each other, and we use that knowledge to solve some of the challenges that we face in building kind of productive, healthy teams in today's really fast-changing hybrid workplace. And I'm really, really passionate that now is the time that organisations really need to focus on improving human connection. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, about why now is the time to really focus on human connection. But my interest and fascination in the power of connection didn't actually start through business. It started back in 1996. Now, for some reason, my screen isn't. Let me come back and do this again.
Let me know if you need any help, Di.
There we go. Is that better for everybody?
Can't see anything yet. Have you shared your screen?
Yeah. You've just practiced this and it worked beautifully.
The other option is if you could open up. Oh, here we go. It's coming now. Yeah.
How's that for everybody?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Right. Let's get back to it. So we're going to be talking about why now is the time to connect. But as I say, my fascination with connection and where our story starts today was actually right back in 1996. That's me, that scruffy one in the centre there. And I was captain of Newcastle University women's football team. And it's fair to say that we were really, really bad footballers. We weren't very skilled. We were tactically very naive. We didn't have a coach. We weren't even really very fit. We spent our evenings in the student union bar, not in the gym. But somehow, every week, every Wednesday afternoon, when we worked and showed up on the pitch to play other teams, we won. Not just once or twice as a fluke, but week after week after week through the knockout rounds, We showed up facing teams who were far superior technically than us, tactically, fitter, healthier, clearly better footballers. Yet somehow we won. And we won every single week, all the end of the year, where we reached the national final, where we lost 15-0 because it was ludicrous by that point. But we didn't care. Our goal was to carry on playing football as long as we could. And I reflected at the end of that year thinking, how was that the case? The players that we were facing were clearly more skilled than us. They were clearly more tactically gifted than us, and they were clearly fitter. So the only explanation that I could come up with as to why we kept winning was the fact that we might not have been as skilled as they were, but we were an incredible team. The bunch of girls on that team, we really, really highly trusted each other. We really understood each other. We worked incredibly hard for each other on the pitch, anticipating each other's moves, working to support. The teamwork was excellent. And when I finished university and started my first business, that was very much the ethos and the culture that I created. We grew a creative agency, a marketing agency, my first business, and we grew it up to 25 staff with a very similar culture. We employed people early on in their careers. We gave them lots of trust, lots of space, created an environment where we really trusted each other, learned from each other, very, very flat hierarchy. And we got very similar results. We pitched up against agencies who were far more experienced than us, far more experienced designers, creatives, account managers. And again, we won. There was something about this power of trust, of human connection, of encouraging people to be the best version that they could, that really helped us compete and perform way better than I guess we could on paper. And so this ignited in me at quite a young age this real fascination with the power of human connection, and why now, many, many years later, I have a genuine and real concern that there is, and there has been for several years now, a connection crisis in our workplace. Now, this wasn't created by the pandemic. Changes in attitude to work have been coming for decades and decades. But a lot of the current challenges were definitely accelerated by the pandemic and the shift to remote working. But the reality is, connection is fading in terms of the way people are connected with the work they do, their colleagues, their managers, their leaders. People are disconnecting at a rate that we've never seen before. And this disconnection has a very real impact both on people and profit within organisations. So from that profit perspective, we can look to the figures. Gallup Workplace Report, which is published every year, looks at kind of global engagement and activity levels. And it reckons that in 2024, due to this lack of employee engagement, this drop in employee engagement, there was a drop in global productivity of $438 billion, which is a crazy number. The phrase that I talk about the connection crisis, Gallup talks about it as the great detachment, but it's just the sense that people are stepping back, caring less, working a little bit less harder, being a little bit less dependable. So due to that, the amount of drop in that engagement in 2024 equated to $438 billion. Now, because Gallup really like big numbers, these are numbers I wouldn't know how to write them down. I don't know how many zeros are on, but Gallup reckons that if we could re-engage, reattach this disconnected workforce, we would stand to gain 9.6 trillion in increased productivity, which I mean is ludicrous, and we will never ever get to the point where everyone is fully engaged in the same way that, you know, we're never going to get to a 100% safety record regardless. There are going to be chinks everywhere. But it's fair to say that this disconnection, this connection crisis is costing an awful lot of money in terms of productivity. That's from drops in productivity level, from disengagement, from increases in absences, increases in attrition. There's lots of reasons why this disengagement is very costly. But as I say, it's not just for profit, it's for people as well. So the CIPD in the UK says that right now, a third of UK adults feel lonely at work. That's a third of UK adults. Just think about the organisations that you're from, and what's a third of your workforce? You know, if you work for an organisation with 100 staff, it's 30 odd people potentially feeling lonely regularly at work. And loneliness it's not about proximity to people. It's about a feeling. It's whether you feel seen and heard, whether you feel valued, trusted, whether you feel you matter. Those are the emotions that fuel a sense of loneliness. And loneliness itself, if left unsupported, can obviously start to drive towards some real mental health issues. And obviously, if we're in the space now of managing risk and managing people's health and well-being, this starts to become very true and relevant to the members of the organisation. And I actually started to look if there was any data that could kind of perhaps indicate any sort of link between this employee connection and engagement and risk management. And interestingly, Gallup, the same workplace report, they reckon that teams with highly engaged employees, so those in the top quarter of percentile for top 25% percentile of engagement, have 63% fewer safety incidents. Now, you're the experts in this than teams with low engagement. Now, you're the expert, so you need to look into that. But from my experience, I can imagine this to be true for many reasons. So if you are working in places with high engagement, high psychological safety, people are more engaged, they're more observant, they're more connected. People care more, so they want to report on things. If you have psychological safety where you welcome criticisms, whistleblowing, people sharing problems that they observe, this correlates with organisations with high levels of engagement. So it would be interesting to explore that further and look between the link between employee connection, human connection, and risk and safety. If you've got any questions, by the way, on any of this, please kind of pop them in the Q&A bot or in the chat. I think Tama's going to pick them up, and I'll happily take any questions at the end. So I think there's some interesting links to be drawn. And that's why I genuinely believe that companies that are going to thrive in the future will be those companies that prioritise human connection. But why? Just because, you know, I pop up on this webinar one lunchtime and suggest it's a good idea that we should all focus on connection. Why is this maybe something for you to consider? Well, to help you consider this and hopefully reach a place of agreement, we're going to look at a few different lenses. We're going to look first of all at a definition of what we mean by human connection in the workplace. We're going to look at the science of connection, a very small neuroscience lesson. We're going to look at some data that backs up why this is maybe a good thing. We're going to look at a few stories, things that people have told us as connection heroes when we've been going around delivering training with different organisations. So let's have a look at this definition first of all. What is it that we actually mean? Well, we define human connection in the workplace as how much colleagues see, hear, trust and value each other. And the most important words in that sentence to me are each other, because connection is reciprocal. Employee engagement is more one way. How engaged are you in your work? How engaged are you with the mission of the company? How are you engaged with our values? Whereas connection is much more about an interactive sense. It's how much we all see and hear and value and trust each other, whether that's leader to the factory floor or whether that's cross department. It's how much we trust each other. And this level of connection affects how well we communicate and how well we collaborate, how engaged and how productive we are, and also how likely we are to stay with an organisation. And as I intimated before, I probably think it affects how safe our workplaces are. If you're working in an environment of high trust, of low trust, how likely are you to report incidences that you're concerned about? How likely are you to report the behaviour of a colleague that you don't think is safe if you're not in a highly connected, high trust environment? So I think there's some very strong links between risk management, but there are also, from the learners that we teach, we've worked with dozens of organisations now, engaged with hundreds and hundreds of individuals and leaders and managers. And they tell us, 92% of them tell us that they feel there's a really strong impact on how connected they feel to the employee well-being within their organisations. So if we feel that organisations with strong levels of human connection are a better place to look after employee well-being, again, that very much comes under the remit of managing employee safety. In terms of the science, so if we understand what we mean by human connection, why is it a good idea for organisations to maybe teach a little bit of neuroscience to help people, whether that's leaders and managers or just everyone in the organisation, just learn a little bit more about our human operating system? So I'm going to work on the assumption, because I can't see a show of hands. Normally at this point, I'd just check in to make sure that we're all human, because it is human neuroscience we're talking about here. If you work with animals, it might be in a slightly different place. But on the assumption that we are all human, it's an absolute fact that we're hardwired for connection. Our brains and our nervous systems have been, that there's a large part of our brain that hasn't shifted since we lived in caves and had to protect ourselves from big beasties. And the way we protected ourselves was by staying part of the tribe. And that tribal part of our brain still directs so much of how we act today. It's this nervous system. It controls how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And obviously that includes how we interact and build relationships and connections with each other. And so I want us to think for a moment that inside our skulls, we have a big cartoon brain that looks a little bit like this. At the front of our brain, this is our prefrontal cortex. This is the slightly more modern part of our brain. And it's where we make decisions. It's where we plan what we're going to do, where we do it and we see it through. It's where we solve problems. It's the strategic part of our brain. It's also the part of our brain where we are more likely to interact and collaborate effectively with our clients. So most days at work, we'd really love to be spending most of our time in this green zone. However, when we start to feel a little bit of threat, a little bit of risk, whether that's real or perceived, doesn't matter, we start to move back from that prefrontal cortex into our limbic system, where our brain's kind of saying to us, there's a rabbit off here. I'm not quite feeling right. I'm not quite feeling safe. And if we don't get support or we're not able to effectively respond in that limbic state, then we slip further back into our primitive brain, our caveman brain, the bit that is responsible for quite basic thinking that keeps us alive. So this is our fight or flight mode. And although we might be okay in this primitive brain for a little while, it might give us a surge to reach a deadline or, a surge to, galvanize a team around an energetic idea. Being in this primitive state for too long is detrimental to our ability to make good decisions and work well with others, because we get adrenaline and cortisol, these stress chemicals running around our body when we're in this primitive state. And these chemicals they have different effects on different people. They might make us feel a little bit anxious, a little bit uncertain, might make us frozen, might make us fearful. We might go into freeze mode or appease mode where we just want to keep everybody happy. Or we might go into fight mode. We get irritable, we get angry, we get combative. In this zone, when we're in the red zone, our green zone, our logical thinking, strategic area of our brain starts to slow down and close down, moving down towards 30, 20% efficacy. So we get brain fog. We can't make good decisions. And if we're in the space where we're managing risk and we can't make good decisions, it's not a healthy place to be. And so this makes us act in certain ways. It might make us snap at others because we're feeling quite defensive. We're feeling not in control of change. We're feeling at threat. So for some people, they might withdraw. They might go quiet. Other people might get loud. They might blame and criticize. We tend to get very resistant to change in this space because we feel out of control and we want things to stay the same for a little while. So if you're trying to roll out any new safety initiatives when people are in the red zone, they're much less likely to land and be engaged with. You might find managers in here micromanaging because they're trying to control the controllables because things feel outside of their control. So it's not a great space for collaboration. It's not a great space for logical decision making, and it's not a great space for effective teamwork. All of that good stuff starts to happen in the green zone. The green zone's where we have a different set of neurochemicals floating around our system. We have serotonin. Serotonin's great for regulating us. It makes us feel that there's no urgent and present threat. It makes us feel like we've got a little bit more time to maybe make wiser decisions or to maybe look around and take more observations of what's happening. This is the part of the brain where we get dopamine, the feel-good chemical released. And that's what can keep us motivated to move through our tasks, to keep going even if we're finding something disengaging or boring. The dopamine is a reward chemical that makes us keep going. And importantly, we also get oxytocin in this part of the brain produced. Oxytocin is it's sometimes called the love chemical or the connection chemical. It's the same chemical that gets released when you, if you see someone at a bar and you fancy them and they smile at you, you'll get an oxytocin release. But you'll get that same relief if your boss really congratulates you on a job well done. Or if you rock up to your Monday meeting morning and your teammates actually genuinely inquire how you've got on, or congratulate you on something you did well last week. It's a connection chemical. It's what bonds us as teams. And so when we've got these chemicals flying around us, we feel differently. We tend to feel a little bit more calm and a bit more in control. We tend to be a little bit happier, a bit more open to change because we're not feeling a threat. Because of this oxytocin and dopamine, we tend to feel a bit more energized, a bit more positive. And critically, we tend to trust and feel trusted more in this zone and much more connected with our teammates. So this is a place where we can operate much more effectively as a team. It's also the place where we feel we've got a little bit more time and space as individuals to make decisions, and we've got a bit more faith in the decisions that we make in this space as well. And so we can see these options. We can critically, the third point there is really important, I think, in the space of kind of risk management and safety. The green zone is the space where it's much easier for us to ask for help and much easier for us to challenge. Because when we're in the red zone, we're very fearful of maintaining our place in the tribe. So if we're in the red zone, we don't really want to ask for help because that might make us seem weak. And our old caveman brain thinks, well, if we're seen as the weak one in the tribe, we might get cast aside because we might slow the tribe down when they're trying to run away from the hairy beastie. Also, in the red zone, we're less likely to challenge. We're less likely to challenge authority or, say yes if everybody else says no, because we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to challenge the status quo because, again, that might cause trouble in the tribe and get us thrown out. So it's this green zone where we can ask for help, very important from a safety perspective, or where we can challenge, where we can share a different opinion to those held by others. So I think really it's fair to say that we're much better at managing risk and making good decisions if we're in this green zone. So should we be focusing on human connection in the workplace? Yes, because it helps us do better work, make better decisions. It helps us understand more how we can operate as a team. And I think understanding about this basic human operating system can also help us develop environments where people are better at managing risk and making safer decisions. So I think the science tells us that organisations that are spending time understanding a little bit of this stuff and helping their teams understand a little bit about how people operate and what factors, for example, what are the risks or perceived risks that might trigger people into the red zone in your work environment, this sort of learning and this sort of time is very well spent. So that's why the science suggests that companies that are going to thrive in the future are going to focus on keeping their teams in that green zone. So understanding what that means is a really useful part of knowledge for your people. Let's see what the data says. Some people like a little bit that neuroscience and it stacks up and they think, yeah, that makes sense. If we want to do well in the future, it's our people that's going to get us there. So let's understand what makes our people tick. Other people are more likely to prioritise connection because the data suggests it's a good idea. Now, data around human connection is still quite early. I've been working in the space of human connection for about 3 or 4 years now. A lot of the data still talks about engagement, which, as we saw, is a slightly different metric, a one-way metric. But there's strong parallels between engagement and data. The sources where we can speak to connection in particular tend to say that in highly connected teams, we see an increase in personal goal attainment and a boost in well-being. As you'd expect, you see a big increase in the positive relationships in the workplace and the benefits around collaboration and productivity that come with that, and a massive increase in professional growth. You have an increase in peer-to-peer learning, an increase in mentoring and buddying and informal support that really does boost professional growth. An interesting source of data that you guys might be interested in is PwC do a trust survey every year. And every year that trust survey creates very clear links between high trust workforce and levels of engagement. So people feel way more engaged and participated in environments where there are a high trust. A lot of the data goes on to kind of suggest that there are more wider business benefits to focusing on engagement and connection around profitability, staff turnover, absenteeism. So the data picture is quite new and emerging. This is something that I'm in particular interested in trying to keep on top of. But all of the data, it makes it very, very clear that there are benefits to both people and productivity and profitability the more we focus on keeping our people engaged and connected with each other. Now, the interesting thing when it comes to connection is when connection is going well, when there are high levels of trust and honest interaction, you can't really see and feel it. But when human connection starts to break down in the workplace, it becomes very apparent. And we see and hear a lot of this when we're going around delivering our workshops and delivering training. We hear what it means when disconnection starts to happen. We hear how it affects people's well-being and how it affects their ability to do their work. So I'm just going to share some examples of the sort of things people tell us when we're out giving our training. These are examples of things that happen when connection starts to break down. So we hear this a lot, for example, across hybrid organisations. We hear people telling us, I just feel like I'm self-employed. I don't feel part of the team. I feel like I'm on my own. And this links to the loneliness point from earlier, but when we interrogate and ask them to explain more about that, people tell us when they log on of a morning and they open up their task list, they feel like that is theirs and theirs alone. They feel the weight of the responsibility of delivering those tasks or their part in a project. They feel like it's a very isolated experience and they alone are responsible to get it done. Now, if you've chosen to be self-employed, that's fine. You can handle that level of responsibility, no problem. If not, if you've chosen to be part of a team and part of an organisation, and this is how you feel, then that's not a healthy behaviour. But it's not something people are reporting to their managers or their bosses. It's the stuff that comes out in workshops. And when people are sharing these stories, you can tell two things. One, they're almost surprised they're saying it out loud because they've never been given a space for this level of honesty before. But two, you can see the level of recognition across their peers, across others in their team, that they too feel like that. So as I say, these things are invisible until you create the space to really ask about them. This one drives me to distraction. We hear it almost every organisation we work with. People telling us things like, we're not allowed to waste time on chit chat. You know, meetings are just really transactional. We're not allowed to just have conversations. We're not allowed to just chat about, you know, get to know each other. It's all just about work updates, project updates. Now, not only does that feel quite an unpleasant place to work, there's a very real commercial reason why that's an absolutely really bad strategic decision, because every business school in the world that's ever published any research or done any studies into the characteristics of high-performing teams absolutely knows that psychological safety is the foundational level from which high performance grows. And you achieve that level of psychological safety through building understanding and a knowledge of each other as humans, building trust, building connection, building empathy. And you can only do that through, you know, chit chat, through conversations, through human interactions, through building human connection. The more transactional our interactions get at work, the less able we are to build that level of psychological safety. And we're seeing that across the board, real reduction in psychological safety. Again, from a risk management perspective, this one's huge. So many organisations, people saying, I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to ask for help because I don't like to bother people. Now, whether that's truth, I do sometimes challenge. Sometimes it is because they don't like to bother people, because they don't have that level of connection. Sometimes it's because they might be in the red zone and they're feeling a threat. And like we said, asking for help makes them seem vulnerable, makes them seem weak, and they don't want to do that. Some people, it's because they are disengaged and they don't ask for help because they just don't genuinely care about the output enough. Interestingly, and I don't really have any explanations for this, but a lot of people, when we dive deeper into this, will say things like, well, I'll ask once, I might ask for help once, but if I don't get it, there's no way I'm asking again. And again, that might be because that kind of shows double weakness. It might be because they don't want to bother, but it's also, did they make the effort in the first place to really ask for help? Did they seek out the right person at the right time and give a really specific help request? Or did they just pop a message on Teams and hope someone finds it? But this is part of this disconnection. And if we can't ask for help when we need it, depending on the environment that we're working in, that could cause a huge safety risk. This is huge. We hear this from people who are quite new to joining organisations, just saying that they're missed out. So they'll join an organisation, no one makes the effort to really understand their knowledge, their experience, the value that they can bring. They just get missed out because people just already ask who they already know. So the same kind of conversations and lines of interaction hold true even when new people join. And again, people join an organisation, they bring value, they bring ideation, they bring ideas, and they're not being able to contribute because they're not getting connected in with their team. And finally, we find that kind of, and again, huge risk impact here. This is we do radical candor training because of this problem. People are telling us that they're really struggling to either give honest feedback, be genuinely truthful to people, or to just face up to difficult conversations. This veneer of politeness, of not wanting to offend, of not being able to be kind of truthful in the feedback that's given, is causing some real issues in terms of development opportunities for the individuals, not getting the feedback they need to improve, for team productivity and performance, because if individuals aren't improving their performance capabilities, then the team capabilities are static. It creates inequalities, because if managers can be honest with half of their team and not the other half of their team, that's inequitable and is going to lead to further cultural issues. And there's obvious safety issues here. If part of the feedback or the challenging conversation regards performances that are in some way unsafe, and managers don't feel able to broach those conversations honestly, then it makes sense that we're heading for trouble. So all of these are examples of things that we hear time and time again when we're out delivering our workshop. And these are clear indicators that this level of human connection, of people feeling seen, heard, valued and trusted, are starting to break down. So there's some real kind of, whether we're interested in the neuroscience and kind of saying, okay, if we understand how each other work, we can work better together. Science works for me. Whether you're interested in the data side, saying, okay, there seems to be some compelling data there. If we can focus on connection, we can maybe improve productivity, maybe we can improve safety, maybe we can improve well-being. Or it might be because you look at some of these stories and you think, yeah, if I'm being honest with myself, I think there's people at our place feel like this. Whichever route works for you, hopefully you're at the point where you're realizing that the companies who are going to succeed in the future are those that want to have these conversations with their team. They want to lead with curiosity to understand how people are feeling and how connected they are. They want to lead with compassion, understanding that doing right by people will automatically produce benefits for profit, and want to lead with inclusion. So at Connection Heroes, we talk about the fact that we want everybody to feel seen, heard, valued and trusted. In the same way that a team is only as psychologically safe as the least safe person, teams are only as connected as how the least connected person feels. So when we have discussions with our organisations, there's sometimes, almost a rejection of policy. Can we really change behaviours and change cultures, whether that's towards connection or safety through policies and procedures? Well, we can do so much with that, but we need to be really empowering our managers to act with curiosity and compassion, backed up by really clear policies and procedures. So hopefully this is kind of helpful to maybe start you guys thinking towards the power of human connection, and maybe way within our organisations we really can start to look at how we can improve connection. So I want to kind of like now turn the tables over to you and maybe give you some things that you can start thinking about if you are maybe starting to realise that there's, I came on this webinar thinking human connection was just about the fact we should have friends at work. If you're starting to realise that it's more than that, and that human connection can be a real driver of both performance and safety, what can you do about it? Well, the first thing that you can do is intention. This is way more powerful than it might at first seem, because the reality is human connection no longer happens by default in today's workplace. That's not just because we are working remotely a lot more. It is because, like I said, of these, it's not a talk for today, but there's lots of longitudinal reasons why attitudes towards work and the role that work plays in our lives has changed radically. Some for the good, some for the bad. But what that means is, as leaders in our organisations, if we don't intentionally prioritize human connection, make it something we want to embed in our daily cultures, it's not going to happen. Now, the problem with human intention is we will only ever kind of intentionally prioritize the things that we value, the things that feel very, very important to us. And we will only ever value the things that we truly, deeply understand. Because if we understand them on a deep level and then we start to value them, we will continue to intentionally prioritize them, even when other priorities come and compete. That's why we teach the neuroscience. That's why we bring the data out, because we really want to create almost a business case for connection so it can be intentionally prioritized permanently. So that's number one. If this stuff is resonating with you, what can you do to intentionally prioritize connection? The second thing that you can do is consider the skills that we might need to bring that intention into daily practice. So I spend my days going around organisations delivering workshops on all different kind of connection skills. So we run connection mindset workshops where we teach about this red zone and the green zone and explore with organisations maybe what the triggers are in their working day that puts people into the red zone, and what tools can we use to bring ourselves back into that green zone, back into that connection zone. There are really practical tools and frameworks that we can teach people, like the Radical Candor framework is a really good tool to help people face up to having these difficult conversations, to help people to give feedback that's really honest and direct and truthful, but delivered with a level of care and compassion that makes people actually want to take it on board and change. You know, if we come with all the hate on someone and a pile on the criticism, but deliver it in a way that triggers them into the red zone, it's never going to get acted upon. So the skills that we can learn to combat some of these problems that arise in the disconnected workplace. So intentionally prioritize connection, realize that maybe we need some different skills in order to do so. And the third thing that you can do is we call them connection rituals. So we're very, very aware when we go around, in particular, delivering management training, that today's managers are at capacity. A lot of them are beyond capacity. We have lots of, technical managers who have been promoted on their skills, but don't necessarily have team leadership experience or natural people skills. And a lot of people who are already, so protective of their team that they work over and above their own role in order to take pressure off their team. So we know if we go in and start asking managers to do more, okay, so build connection, you on top of your normal job, you need to start doing this and this and this. It's impossible. They don't have time to do more. So we say, okay, well, let's have a look how you currently kind of interact with your team. How do you currently, manage relationships with your team? And most teams will do things like, a start of week kickoff meeting, or an end of week review meeting, or maybe a monthly town hall. There's things that you already do as managers to try and keep your team connected. And we look at moments in those existing interactions where we maybe just do something a little bit differently. So we're not doing more, we're just choosing intentionally to do a few things a little bit differently, purely to dial up the focus on human connection. And when we design these rituals, we go into organisations, we help them identify their connection blockers, and then we help them co-design what these rituals are. So these aren't rituals that I've come in as a consultant and landed. I'm just going to share a few example rituals that the clients we've worked with have come up with. When we design these rituals, there's 2 questions that we always ask them to come up with. And we use these as the basis for the design. These set the design objectives for the rituals. And if you wanted to do this with some of your own team, I would really encourage you to go and ask these 2 questions in your organisation. The first is, why does connection matter to us? As a team or as an organisation, why does human connection matter? And the sort of things that come up when we ask these questions of teams are around, well, we've got joint goals that we need to move towards, or, we've got to, we can't do our part of the project unless we understand what your outputs are, because they fuel into us. Or it might be, well, it's more fun. We come here and we want to enjoy our work. I want to know the people I work with. So there'll be all sorts of different reasons why your team will tell you that connection matters. And once you've exhausted and got all of those on the board, you then say, right, okay, what stops this happening? If we all know that kind of connection will help us achieve all of these things as a team, Why aren't we doing it? And usually the reasons that people cite will fall into two buckets: either people issues, attitudes, people that have been here longer not engaging with newer members of the team, certain attitudes where people are very risk averse and don't want to feel like they're wrong, people not being vulnerable, people not asking for help. So some of the blockers are people issues, but some of them are process issues. So, inability to share data, different communication tools. So one team relies on emails and another team relies on Teams chat. So some will be people issues and some will be process issues. But if you have these conversations, you can start to understand, why does connection matter and what's stopping it? And then you can design rituals to dial up all of those reasons why it matters and to combat some of those blockers. So I'll move on to that. So the sort of connection rituals that our teams come up with, a couple of my favourites. One is, it's a ritual called 3 Good Things. And this is a great thing to do on a Monday morning, where you're encouraging people to come to work having reflected positively on the week before. So instead of that kind of Sunday night, Monday morning feeling where you're thinking of the negatives and the bad things, if one of the things that you do on your Monday morning is share 3 good things that happened the previous week, then you're doing neurochemically, what you're doing is you're releasing kind of that oxytocin because you're thinking of the good things that other people on the team did for you, and dopamine because you're remembering kind of good feelings. You're getting people into the green zone. When people are listing those 3 good things, so it might be a colleague that really helped them out with a report, or a compliment they got from a client, or the fact that they needed help on a project and their manager really sat down and helped them with it. Encourage them to reference these 3 things and say thanks for the people involved in them, is building that connection and combating the rise of what we're seeing in workplaces. All of the workplaces we work with, there's a real rise in negativity bias, which is people remembering the bad, or people looking for barriers, looking for reasons why not to do things. So in our teams, we really want to try and encourage positive intent. So encouraging, if you're finding that, people are coming in the negative mood, maybe you could start to look at a 3 good things ritual. One of my favourites, which is a ritual that a team introduced, where they were finding there were pockets of trust, pockets of psychological safety, but they weren't uniform across the team. People felt, safe in front of 1 or 2 colleagues, but they really wanted to drive a higher trust culture across the team. So they said at their end of week meetings every Friday, they were going to host a ritual called F Up Friday, where everyone on the team would basically share something they'd effed up that week, a mistake they'd made. And what they're really doing is systematically embedding the practice of vulnerability across the whole team. So the team managers and the team leads would do this as well. Everyone just sharing something they'd messed up that week as a way of absolutely demonstrating that, mistakes happen and we're all fallible. And this is a culture, and we watch people to be open about the mistakes, share for them, ask for help if we need it. So these rituals are short, sweet, maybe agenda items at your team meetings that you have anyway, that will just really dial a focus on human connection and really combat some of the connection blockers that your team might be facing. So I hope this has all given you a flavour, whether it's through the understanding the human operating system and how that can help us connect, whether it's through the data, or whether it's through some of the stories that people share with us when we're training. I hope this has really whetted your appetite for how you might want to improve human connection and why you might want to improve human connection. If it has, we launched at the end of last year. It's micro learning course, in all honesty, might be a bit of a grand title for it. It's a 7-day course where each day you'll get a kind of single page PDF into your inbox, which will explain a different aspect of the connection mindset. You can see some of them listed there. And you'll find that those link off to articles and videos that you can watch. So there's a video, for example, on the radical candor that I mentioned, video on proximity bias, proximity on leading through stress. So there's various videos, resources. It's all free. You can use that QR code if you wish and go check out that course. So for me, that's the formal kind of part over. I just want to say thank you for listening. Again, if you want any resources and information about this kind of stuff, that QR code is to my Linktree. So that links off, so you can find me on LinkedIn, and again, links off to the various kind of activities, resources. We've got a massive blog on the website with lots of articles in there if you want to learn anything more. but that's it from me. So Tama, I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Di. I've obviously heard you speak before, which is why I invited you onto the webinar, but I genuinely feel like this is such a fascinating subject. And although we are looking at it through the lens of kind of like organizational, sustainability, are organizations going to survive and or thrive? But that kind of risk and compliance management. But I do just think it's because humans are at the center of everything, aren't they? Like, especially within organizations. So it just touches on like so many kind of parts of how we business, how we work, and ultimately how we connect with each other. I am going to move over to some questions, and then we'll see how we go with that. Otherwise, I've potentially got a few more. So the first question we've had was kind of asking in terms of how people engage. Are you noticing that there are differences between the age groups who are kind of willing to ask for help, how open they are to it? Do you find kind of intergenerational workforces would have different pain points in that kind of asking, engaging?
Yeah, there are definite themes that emerge, some that intergenerationally. Some of the themes are interesting and they may challenge. So a lot of people assume that the younger generation, for example, are, wanting to work more remotely, wanting to work kind of from home, less wanting to step up and be in person and ask for help and mentorship because, these digital natives. That's not actually the case. What we're noticing is it's the younger people actively seeking, wanting to be in the organization, wanting to connect more socially, wanting to learn. We're finding it's challenging. I wouldn't say there's a reticence to do it. What we're finding is senior managers who are obviously kind of like late 40s plus in most sectors by the time they got to a level of seniority, are finding that there's two responses. You obviously saw last year a big, huge surge in the RTO mandates, the return to office mandates. The data is suggesting that they're failing in terms of any impact on productivity and a negative impact on attrition. And that suggests to me that there is a desire for collaboration, a desire for connection, but a naive view of how to achieve that. And again, by demanding everybody back into the office, you are often, without a data-driven cause, you are kind of removing that layer of trust and psychological safety that is the actual prerequisite to an improvement in collaboration. So we are seeing, but there is this vulnerability, this ability to. So we talk a lot about trying to change the narrative. So stop talking about physical connection. Should we be in the office more? Should we be face to face? Talk instead about human connection. How can we build trust? How can we build understanding? How can we create what I had with those footy girls back at uni? And that's a very open conversation that we're finding a lot of senior managers are quite uncomfortable having, because it then does start to talk about neuroscience, about connection, about, things that actually the younger generation are very comfortable talking about this. We are finding that it's a very uncomfortable situation for a lot of senior, older leaders.
It's really interesting because as you were going through that, I was thinking about terms like psychological safety and like vulnerability, and literally the thought popped into my head. I was like, did we really know what these words were, maybe 5, 10 years ago, or is it kind of this rise in education and kind of publicly available information that is making us all kind of slightly more aware, but really very interesting. That actually is a nice segue into the next question. So when you popped up the slide that said kind of over to you, you mentioned skills. And I suppose I'm talking about kind of leadership skills, but then also colleague skills. How do we just work as teams? Is there a quick win skill that we could all take away today and either start to develop or research or try to implement that might just support a little bit more connection?
Absolutely right. Okay, I'll do a mindset shift and a tool. So The biggest thing you can do to start to improve connection with colleagues and your team is introduce this language of red zone, green zone, and what it means, and have this conversation, because we're all uniquely human, right? So we all have the same neurochemical response to threat or perceived threat, all of us. But we all can react differently to that neurochemical response. So fight or flight. So that's a great case in point. Is you're working on a project with a team, and all of a sudden you thought you had a month until the deadline, the client changes their mind and you've got to deliver it next week. Okay, stressful situation, the likelihood everyone's going to go in the red zone. The difference is, Tamer, your response to the adrenaline and cortisol rush might put you into fight mode. So you might step up, body language changes, right, we're going to tackle this head on. That's your natural stress response. I might go into freeze or appease mode. My red zone state may now go quiet. I might go withdrawn. Now, what happens if we don't have this awareness and appreciation of this basic neurochemistry? You could end up getting really peed off at me because you think I don't care, because I haven't stood up to fight. I've gone very quiet and real. So you then start to judge me. So we're in a red zone situation with stress and change. We've disconnected because you've judged me. Whereas if you can just at that moment step back and say, right, okay, red zone situation here, Di's gone quiet. Actually, Di's the quiet one. She might have a different thought on this to me. She's just not vocalizing it. So instead of judging, you reach out with curiosity and compassion to say, we're in this together. Do you want to contribute? So there's a mindset shift, which you can all start to become responsible of. What are your own red zone triggers? What puts you in that state? And just start to notice those around you. So that's one tool. The other side is practical tools that we can use. So a great tool that we teach is the Moscow technique, which you can look up. It's an agile project management technique. Capital M, little o, capital SC, little o, capital W. So it stands for must, should, could, won't. And the Moscow tool is brilliant when you're at a point where either there's been significant change, or you just suddenly, for whatever reason, have that point in a project where you're like, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going anymore. You thought, maybe last week you were all on track, you felt in control, you knew where we were going. You suddenly have that moment, you're like, everything's changed, right? What are we doing? Are we doing the right stuff here? Or you might be overwhelmed and look at the amount of tasks you've got to do as a team. Just think, right, we need to prioritize this. So you're at that point where you need to prioritize it. Now, the Moscow tool helps you prioritize as a team, and it's really powerful. The first thing you need to do under Moscow is to have a very clear set agreed objective. So it might be, right, we need to get to the end of this week, team. We need to have kept that client happy and that client happy, and we all still need to be alive, right? So that's the priority, is keeping that client and that client happy. Then under Moscow, you say, right, everything that we've got, right, pile everything on that we've got to do for the day. And then we say, right, in order to keep that client and that client happy, which of these must we do? Should we do, could we do, and which we won't do? And that's a really useful tool because you're prioritizing against a shared objective, number one. But because we're operating that in a psychologically safe environment, not everybody has to agree. So Tamer, you might think that something's a must because it's imperative. If we don't do that, we're going to really piss off that client. I might have a different piece of knowledge to know that actually we did that for them a few years ago. They didn't like it. So I might be arguing that that's a could. We allow that discussion to take place. So we're sharing that information and reaching an agreed decision. So you might say, oh, I actually didn't realize that. Thank God we can put that as a could. And what we're doing is that using that tool, the interactions and the discussions that single tool makes, means that all of those disagreements that at some point will bubble up and derail the project come out early on and allow us to reprioritize together. So yeah, green zone thinking, green zone, and red zone triggers, and check out the Moscow tool.
Excellent. I just did a wee little Google while you were saying that there, so I'll share a little YouTube intro to that. But I like that. I like the structure of organizing, prioritizing, and if you have any other resources, please do share them with us.
Actually, I've got a video on how Moscow can save Christmas. I'll share that with you.
Oh, that sounds necessary. Considering the chaos that's just been, maybe some of us could prepare better for Christmas 2026.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I've just got one more question to end with, and it's kind of a relatively complicated, straightforward question. I'm thinking obviously from the perspective of health and safety, and specifically legislation, which is kind of my remit of interest, and kind of how the law considers human risk and human error in kind of major health and safety and environmental events that might occur.
Mhm.
In your view, do you think businesses are missing a trick by not seriously considering the risk of deconnection within their
Oh,
organizations and the fallout consequences of that?
hugely. Managing risk ultimately is always going to be a human endeavor, isn't it? Like it's always going to come down, it's inherently human. What's also inherently human is we all have different brains, different levels of risk, different, attitudes to risk, different experiences of risk. Yet we don't have these conversations. We don't prioritize, we don't intentionally prioritize these differences. And I remember years ago, being way before Connection Heroes, reading Freakonomics and reading the article about the differences in crash rates between different national airlines and how those social interactions in cultures where there's really strong hierarchy and the co-pilot, might spot a risk, but culturally cannot say anything to the pilot in that moment, in that short 30-second window where that risk of crash could be put off. There's something about the human connection in that moment prevents that conversation. And if you look at the airline risk of different nationalities, there's a correlation with it. And it's like, to me, that I remember that story stayed with me from reading that book over a decade ago. And I think that's it in a nutshell. The way we are as humans so heavily influences our attitudes to risk with practical impacts like that.
Absolutely. Yes, you shared that story with me, and it stuck with me for quite significantly as well, as kind of a key point as to why psychological safety matters so much in the context of risk management, health, safety, and environmental protection. Di, it's been an absolute pleasure. We are so grateful to have had you join us for this lunchtime webinar. It's been really, really interesting. I've got loads of little tabs open for some further research after this, but on behalf of us, the Northeastern Cumbria branch, and on behalf of IIRSM, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Oh,
If anybody would like to get in touch with Di, her details are shared within this webinar, so please do not hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, everybody, hope you have a wonderful afternoon.